You've been prepping for the Kira verbal questions, but suddenly you get a written prompt. You've only got a few minutes, no spell check, and you're being judged on what you write. Don't panic. In this video, I'm gonna break down exactly how to handle the Kira written questions like a pro. We'll cover what to expect, how schools use them, and I'll even walk you through a sample response. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Caitlin Anderson, graduate admissions consultant and Oxford MBA who has helped hundreds of students win interviews and offers to all the top business schools in the world, including Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, MIT, and Yale, and win over $1 million in scholarships. What are Kira written questions? They are short, typed responses that you are given usually 5 to 10 minutes to read a question and then write your response. Not all schools will use a written question in their Kira Talent interview, but if yours does, you can usually expect to see it at the end of the Kira Talent interview. However, there are schools that will put the written question in between their verbal questions. These questions can be behavioral, motivational, analytical, or even random. And there's no spell check, no grammar tools, no fancy formatting, just your raw writing. Examples of written questions include, tell us about a time you had to overcome a challenge at work. Why do you want to join our program? What would you do if your team wasn't meeting a deadline? Compose an email to an executive at your company telling them you need a bigger budget for a project. I'm always asked by my students, why do they include the written question in the Kira Talent interview? And there are many reasons. The first would be they want to see how you think on the spot. The second would be they want to see your written communication abilities to understand how you'll perform when you need to work in group projects, on reports, or written assignments. Third, if you are a non-native English speaker, they will use the written assessment to check your fluency in English. And finally, to check for consistency between what you say in the video questions and in the rest of your application. Now, let's talk about how to prepare for the Kira written question. I always teach my students the 3-part framework: introduction, body, conclusion. In your introduction, the first sentence needs to be a direct response to the question you were asked or your conclusion. Then the second sentence in your introduction needs to give 2 to 3 reasons or evidence for your conclusion. For the body, you will then start with reason number 1 and you will expand on it. You can explain it a little, maybe 1 or 2 sentences used to explain that reason, but it's so important that in that first paragraph of your body, when you're explaining reason number 1, that you also give me some proof, some evidence, and that's gonna be a fact, or it's gonna be a story from your background, or about a company, or about somebody else that proves your point. Then for the rest of your body, you're going to do the same thing you did for point number 1, for point number 2, number 3, number 4, how many ever points you decide to give. And remember, it needs to be first explaining the point a little bit more, but then spending the bulk of that paragraph in the body on the evidence, the proof. We don't just believe what you say when you say it, we need proof. Then the conclusion, you're going to refer back to your introduction, your main recommendation for this essay, whatever final conclusion you've made, you refer back to it, but you don't use the same words. You're gonna say it differently. And then you end on a forward-looking note. Something about how the world's going to be improved, or about the excitement for the next phase, or even about the overall impact. When you're responding to a written question that is a behavioral question, like tell me about a time when you failed, tell me about a time when you innovated, then you want to use the STARL method, which stands for situation, task, action, result, and lessons learned, where the S and the T are the introduction, the A and the R are your body, and the L is your conclusion. Now remember, you want to use the least amount of real estate in your essay on the S and the T and the R, and the most amount of real estate in your essay on the A and the L, because these are the areas that the admissions committees want to learn and hear about from you. For the STARL method, I want to tell you about a common mistake I see my students making, because you are going to use the STARL method not just in the Kira written responses, but in the Kira verbal questions and in your essays within the application, and even in the interviews with a human being. So when you're telling me a story using STARL and you come to the A and you're ready to tell me the decision, the action that you took, I want you first to tell me the thinking behind that decision. How did you know to make that decision, to take that action? That is what the admissions committee is going to be very interested in understanding. So make sure you include the how you arrived at the decision. For example, if you were telling a story about how you wanted to become a more organized individual, and the action part of that was to tell the admissions committee that you added being organized to your identity so that it would then filter into your action, then you can tell them that, but they will be left thinking, how would you know that you need to make being an organized individual part of your identity so that it would then become part of you? It's quite a leap if you don't have some other information. So you need to tell them where you got that from. How did you know to take that action, to add being an organized individual to your identity? So you'd say, I read this book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I understood that I need to add being an organized individual to my identity if I'm going to actually make it part of my action. So that would clear up that question in the admissions committee's minds as to where you got that insight to take that action, which is what they're going to wonder when you tell them about the action that you took. Sharing the insight that led you to an action is gold for the admissions committee. It shows them you have a high emotional intelligence and that you can take in a lot of information from the world around you and then apply it and get some good result. And that's going to impress the admissions committees. To expand a little bit on the L, the lessons learned. This is some insight into human nature or how the world works that you're going to tell at the end, your conclusion, that will show that you have a deeper understanding of how the event that you're describing fits into the world around you. All right, now we're going to do a sample prompt and we're going to do a walkthrough of how you could respond to this question. The question is, tell us about a time you had to work with someone difficult. So the first thing I would notice about this question is that it is a behavioral question. So we're going to use the STARL method. So let's start with the S and the T. We might write something like, after my first year at Company X, I was promoted to lead a 3-person team in the Y department. One of my teammates often missed deadlines and wouldn't communicate clearly. This impacted my ability to meet deadlines and began affecting our entire team's performance. So in this response, I started by telling them a little bit about where I am. Okay, I'm at this company, I'm in this department, I'm leading this team of 3. Just a quick sentence about the details of where it was and what was going on. Then I swiftly move into the T, the task or the challenge. And in this case, it is that one of my teammates is not meeting deadlines. Now, what I also did that you'll see is I started to paint the picture to be as dark as possible. It was now affecting the entire team. So now we're gonna give the A, or the action, but remember, we need to give our thinking before we give the A. So we might write something like, I stepped back to think about the situation, what I should do. That was when I remembered a leadership conference I had attended where they talked about understanding the context for every situation when the answer is not obvious. Also, I follow Simon Sinek, who says great leaders are the last people to speak in a meeting. I decided to set up a one-on-one meeting to understand my teammate's perspective. I listened through the entire meeting and I learned he was overwhelmed and didn't want to seem incompetent by asking for help. At the end of the meeting, I asked him whether it would help if we set up weekly check-ins so he could ask me questions. Next, we have the R, or the result, and we might write it like this. A standing meeting was all he needed because after that, he asked questions and delivered his work ahead of schedule. In fact, the rest of our team was further motivated by his newfound enthusiasm for the work that our team became the top performing team in the department. Now we need our lessons learned, so we might write it like this. That experience taught me the value of listening and pausing to remember I don't ever have the full story. There are always missing pieces of information that, if I knew, might completely change my perspective and response to someone, which in turn could change the person's behavior and our outcomes. I am so grateful for this lesson, and I will carry it with me throughout my career. Now that you have that example of how to respond to a written question, I want to leave you with a few tips. First, you want to, on the day of your Kira Talent interview, warm yourself up with responding to maybe 2 or 3 written questions under timed conditions. Give yourself 5 minutes or 10 minutes to respond. In the response, before you actually begin typing, you want to write out bullet points that follow the structure, intro, body, conclusion. Give yourself a 30-second buffer of time at the end of the written question to go back and check for spelling errors, for grammar, for sentence structure. Don't overthink it. Clarity and structure matter far more than a fancy vocabulary. If this helped you to feel more confident about Kira's written questions, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps keep the channel alive. I post weekly content on how to get into top business schools. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.